This is one of the craziest on-chain runs that I've seen in many, many months in crypto. As you can see in front of you, many of the tokens on the Binance Smart Chain in the BNB ecosystem are absolutely exploding. You can see Broccoli here. You can see a bunch of Chinese coins. You can see this new MemeCoin 4, GIGGLE, up 583% this week. So there are a lot of crazy movers at the moment. And today I want to talk about where you can benefit. So I'm going to give you my full breakdown of the ecosystem, the coins that I'm personally avoiding, the coins that I personally think are presenting interesting setups. And I'm going to give you my framework for successfully trading this rotation, because as with a lot of rotations in crypto, it is easy to lose money. So I want to make sure that you are actually set up for success when it comes to maximizing the BSC ecosystem. So I've got a spreadsheet today I'm going to show you. I'll go through all of the coins, how I think about trading these rotations, and hopefully by the end, you're in a pretty good position to capitalize from what is one of the bigger capital inflows. As you can see here, if you look at, Ethereum, Solana right now, Arbitrum, a lot of capital is flowing out of these chains into, of course, the BNB chain. So it's one of the biggest bridging events we've seen in quite some time. So before we get into the video, I just want to remind you that nothing in this video is financial advice. Of course, trade at your own discretion. Everything here is my opinion only. And of course, you should do your own research before entering a coin, and all of the full terms and conditions and disclaimer are in the description as usual, so you can look at that in your own time. Also, make sure to subscribe to the channel if you aren't subscribed already, so I can keep bringing you the crypto alpha here on the channel. This channel is more relevant market-based stuff, market updates, urgent stuff. And then my other channel, which is also in the description, Crypto Edge, is my more evergreen-based framework strategy channel, which we recently launched, which I think you guys are loving, because we're doing things like portfolio videos, mental models, all that sort of stuff to help you succeed in the market. But today we've got the time-sensitive alpha, and it is, I think, pretty time-sensitive because a lot of these have been absolutely exploding, especially the on-chain stuff. So yeah, without further ado, let's get into the video here. So firstly, let's talk about BNB, because I think this entire narrative is predicated on the fact that BNB is on a massive run right now. And I think one of the reasons for the run is the DAT. Clearly, there is a pretty insane treasury bid that's happening, and there's a flywheel between the DAT and the BNB token. And we know CZ, we know he's come back from the issues that he had with the DOJ, and he's come back with vengeance because he's, been pushing BNB, he's been pushing ASTER, he's become really active. And I think, he's kind of like a KOL in a way, like everyone's following his lead, and he's created this big narrative in the market. But that is also being propped up. It's not just the narrative. We spoke about in the last video how flows are so important. The BNB token's seen a lot of flows, not only speculative, but also off the fact that they're just buying a lot of BNB, and there's obviously a strong flywheel with the exchange token itself. So I think I saw this quote the other day that BNB is like crypto's Nvidia, and I think there's an element of truth there. It's basically a pick and shovel to the success of the industry, because Binance is the biggest exchange. So they're loosely correlated in the sense that the more volume and the more people are using Binance, theoretically, the better BNB should do. But I do think there are other factors at play here, because, theoretically there were more users in 2021, but the token is much higher now than it was back in 2021. I'll go into the weekly chart. And I think that's just down to the fact that there are better flywheel mechanics at play right now, and there's obviously a lot of buy pressure going into the token. So I think it just reiterates the point that I made on the show a couple days ago about how flows are so important. Does a token have net inflows or net outflows? And how is that actually balanced? Where's the buy pressure coming from, and where's the sell pressure coming from? And although there are some whales and early BNB holders and shorters that are adding pressure to BNB, there's just a lot more buy volume happening from these DAT buybacks, happening from people on Binance, and obviously you get a speculative bid off the back of that. And it's not just Binance. I think there's a narrative in general for exchange tokens right now. I mean, the strongest performers over the past couple of months, and especially over the past week, have been coins like BNB, have been Mantle, have been, OKB. The exchange tokens are what are really outperforming at the moment. Mantle for me has been one of my best holds of the year so far. I think I bought in publicly at around 60 cents. It's now, I think, heading up towards the $2.50 mark. So that alongside BNB have really been outperforming. And also the OKX token, the BGB token, they're all following a similar playbook. And basically the way to view them are, pick and shovel plays. But BNB, I think, has an advantage in terms of spurring a bigger ecosystem rotation, just down to the fact that, obviously CZ, as I said, like one of the strongest KOLs in a way in crypto, is actively pushing the narrative. And we've really seen, and obviously I don't speak Chinese, but based on all of the social data and, even if you scroll through your feed, you can see there's clearly a lot of interest from the East. Now, obviously, if you're in a Western community like me, you can't always see what's happening there, but there is a lot of trading volume coming out of the East at the moment, and there is a lot of interest, and a lot of that interest is not surrounding Solana or Ethereum right now. It's actually surrounding the BNB ecosystem. So before I get into the tokens and we get a little bit degen today, I just want to say that whether you play these small caps or not, and whether you actually choose to invest in some of this stuff, purely depends on your predisposition towards the BNB token. Like, do you think this will continue to have upside? Because if you think it can keep going towards the $2,000 mark, and I'm leaning that way just based on the trend that it could continue to have upside, then I think some of the plays within the ecosystem are going to do really well. And this could be, the beginning of a bigger trend. But you also have to be open to the fact that it has run quite aggressively, and we could be looking to form a local top soon in the ecosystem. So one of the approaches that I'm going to show you later strategically is going to protect you a little bit to make sure that you're not exit liquidity, for this narrative. Because we do know, and I want to issue a bit of caution, that narratives in the BSC ecosystem previously have been a little bit short-lived. Like earlier in the year and last year, we saw like a really quick 2 to 3 week rotation, similar to what you'd see on like a base network of like, a lot of hype, and then it cools down. So it's only been a few weeks. So whether this has the staying power and longevity is yet to be seen. I do think it's slightly different now though to those previous rotations. And I'm a little bit more interested now than I was during the previous rotation because of the fact that BNB is this strong, and because of the fact the main narrative of the market is centered around CZ and his projects like, ASTER, for example, which we'll speak about in today's video because it is on this list. So it feels a little bit different, but I just wanted to put it out there that the way you trade this list will depend on your bullishness towards BNB in general. But without further ado, let's go through the watch list, which I created. I posted this in the Discord and Telegram before I started recording here, so you guys got early access to it. But now let's go through and let's talk about how you can actually play each of these coins, and my opinion on each of these coins, and how you can actually strategize not only your trading, but you're investing in the BSC ecosystem. So I think the best place to start is BNB, as we discussed before. A lot of your strategy here will depend on your bullishness towards BNB or your bearishness towards BNB on the other hand. And clearly this is being driven, as I mentioned, by a big DAT bid, but it's also just very strong technically. Price action has been pretty incredible on BNB, and it just goes higher and higher and higher. I do think if you held a portfolio of like Bitcoin, BNB, MNT, maybe Hyperliquid, like going into Q4 as your core portfolio, you're probably going to outperform. I think that's saying something. Like clearly, the more you could concentrate your portfolio into tokens with positive flows, at least like the core percentage of your portfolio, the better off you're going to be. I'm not necessarily advocating for that. I'm just, putting it out there as a hypothetical. Like, I think BNB is a good place to be if you're betting on crypto upside alongside Bitcoin. It really seems like that token. Now, I am not a big holder of BNB. I've mostly just been trading the coin. Like I've been long at certain points over the past week. I actually closed my long into resistance here, and I might actually re-enter a breakout trade. So if we push up into this level and see a rejection like I expect, and we maintain bullish structure, I'll look at a breakout trade, which could take us to 1500. So for me, I'm just trading BNB, but I would potentially look at a bigger entry if it got a pullback. As you can see, it's been in an uptrend since the end of September quite aggressively. But if, let's say, it went like this and then we saw a big dip, I might look at re-entering because I could always put my stop below like the previous base low. So I could look at an inval, like a spot inval of like 4%, which for me is quite attractive because it's always very important to have invalidations when you're getting in this late in the cycle, like, in the scheme of things, as you can see on the chart here, since the FTX lows in 2022. So with BNB, it's a token that, yes, I think it's in an uptrend, but I would definitely be looking at picking it off on major dips. And with some of the lower caps we're going to talk about today, a lot of them, because they are higher risk like beta plays, they're going to be extremely reflexive to BNB. So if it did have dips, some of these would go down a lot further. And if you're bullish on the overall like macro uptrend for BNB, that would actually be your opportunity to average into a lot of this stuff. So that's BNB. The next one, ASTER, and these are like the three leaders, and then we'll get into all the degen stuff and what I'm doing there, all of the fun stuff. ASTER is obviously, one of CZ's main coins as well. It's kind of softened a bit, and it's, chopped. There's been been a lot of announcements. They had their airdrop announcement. There was also, news that came out about CZ not being that involved. And then there was, rumors recently of wash trading, and DeFi Llama actually delisted them. So there's been kind of lots of FUD, which I think kept the price muted. But overall, one thing is very clear. CZ and Binance both seem pretty incentivized to see ASTER work. And I'm seeing a lot of criticism coming for ASTER that they're matching the books with the Binance exchange. However, if they're doing that, that just shows that Binance has a vested interest, and they're working very closely with ASTER to make sure ASTER has the most volume possible. Because if they're spoofing volume, it means they're trying to inflate volume. If they're trying to inflate volume, it means that they're trying to increase the overall mindshare, narrative, and ultimately valuation of ASTER, which means there's a vested interest there. And clearly CZ supporting it, and a lot of Binance people supporting it, is a very good sign that they're serious about ASTER. So I still think as a trade, this has upside. It's just most of my position I'm out of right now. Obviously, I took the trade at 50 cents. I've spoken about it a fair bit. Then I took profits on the way up. It's in a bit of a downtrend right now, but if this compression leads to a bigger breakout, and that breakout is obviously going to be of this 217 resistance here, there could potentially be a big next leg for ASTER, and I do want to be exposed if that's the case. So I'm very open to a new long. It'll either come on a big breakout, or if we get like a big dip, something like this where we actually sweep these lows again, I would be interested in taking the new range low to range high swing trade on ASTER. So those are the two setups I'm looking at, but ASTER is definitely one I want more exposure to again at some point. I'm just putting it on the radar right now. The next one is Cake. Cake's been a pretty good one. I've been trading Cake. I don't have a huge spot bag, but it's been a pretty good trade. I'm still in my position, and this is one that Fabian shared in the Discord on the 3rd of October, so 5 days ago. This is, I think, when price was like $3.20. So down here, and since then it's gone up. Where is it up since this breakout here? 54%. It's now sitting around 50% up. So pretty good trade from Fabian. He always puts us onto the alpha pretty early, so it's amazing to have him in the Discord community, always posting his amazing alpha. He also called launch coin at 17 million, so I definitely owe him. He also found ASTER in April, so the guy's insane, to be honest, in terms of his track record. But yeah, Cake I still think is a good one, just given the fact that a lot of these are really risky. Like the rotation games, we'll get into it in a minute, are pretty crazy, like the PvP on-chain games with the lower cap altcoins. But something like a Cake, I think you can long it with a little bit more confidence. It kind of sits in a similar boat to ASTER, where you could actually look at potentially sizing up on a breakout trade, just given the fact that it has more liquidity, it's more well known, and it's not as PvP. And the thing with these narratives, and we'll get to like the full strategy in a couple of minutes, is that you generally want to play the leaders. Like the PvP game can be really aggressive. So if you're trying to time rotations between these memes, you can get chopped up quite easily if you really don't know what you're doing. So a lot of the time, it's best to just fall back on a strategy of just longing the leaders. So if you look at like the Solana run last year, the best thing to do was just long Solana and long WIF and long maybe a couple of the top memes, and then save a small percentage of your portfolio to go a bit more aggressive and actually trade within the narrative, or take a few dart throw bets, moonshot bets. So kind of like a barbell strategy, right? So you're hyper conservative in the scheme of the narrative, obviously not in terms of your overall portfolio, but you're conservative with like BNB, for example, and Cake and ASTER, and then you go a little bit more aggressive, like, with gambling money, essentially. It might only be 10 to 20% of your entire BNB portfolio, and then you don't try and position in too many like midterm holds. I think that genuinely is the way that I'm looking at this narrative personally. And obviously the way you trade will depend on your skill set. Like if you're really good on chain, you could, potentially size up into this hyper aggressive basket. But for me, I want to go a little bit more conservative because I frankly don't have or want to spend my time like trenching all day. I did a couple hours of trenching today. As you can see, I'm eating pretty clean, just a beef salad here and some green tea. I think it's very important to eat clean if you want a healthy mind, and obviously that's going to lead to healthy and more profitable trades and more focus. So I think that is very important. But yeah, I was basically just trenching for a couple of hours, finding some stuff, doing some research for this video. But that's pretty much the extent of it for me. And then I lean on my research team to, feed me with some alpha. And I think we got some good alpha here in today's video. But I'm not trenching all day. I'm seeing some people right now going to all sorts of lengths to join in on like the Chinese trade, because clearly there's a lot of buy volume and interest coming out of China. So I've seen people like buying X accounts and, using them to get into like Chinese groups and all sorts of crazy stuff, which, I mean, I guess fair play if you're, really, really, really dedicated to maximizing the game here, but that's not my edge. But I guess my point is, for some of you, it could be your edge, like this real trenching, being up all day, watching and tracking wallet flows and being in all these Telegram groups and then striking if you see an opportunity. That might be you, and then you might change this a little bit. But for me, I think it's safer, in my opinion, to play the leaders and for the average person as well. So that's where something like a Cake comes in. Now, with something like Cake, you don't need to top blast this. This will have, drawdowns, and I do think it's better to have like a slightly more mid to long-term view on this ecosystem rather than trying to catch a rotation. Like, I think if you think BNB has staying power over the quarter, you are going to get periods where you have, drawdowns on Cake, you have drawdowns on ASTER. Not only that, but you have breakout setups, and then you can take better entries with decent risk management. Of course, if you feel like you're lacking exposure and you're in other coins that aren't performing so well, you could look at making some swaps to position in the narrative. But, I just want to issue, a bit of caution to like FOMOing fully into BSC, because I am seeing some people starting to do that, and it gets a little bit, I think, scary if you take on that much risk, in my opinion. Going down the risk curve a bit, let's get into some of the fun stuff. Once again, I'll show you the disclaimer, because this stuff gets a little bit degen, and don't just ape into the stuff, research the stuff, but I'll give you some of my opinions on some of these coins. The first one's FLOKI. I actually think out of all of them, like, Cake's already moved a bit. Obviously, BNB's moved a lot, but FLOKI's one of the OG memes on BSC, which hasn't moved, and there's a level where I'm very interested in entering a bigger position, and it's this level here. It's a pretty key line in the sand at the 10.820 level here, and if we could get confirmation or a flip above that, I could see it at least going to the prior high, and that in itself is a move of 40 to 50%, and then, if it went to the mid zone of the range, you're looking at like 70, 80% potentially. So I like this. I also like the fact that it is in an uptrend. You can see it's formed a nice base. And if we do get a little bit of a slow move here, like let's say more compression into this level, I think that would only lead to a bigger breakout. So I do like the technical setup on FLOKI right now, and that's one that really interests me. Another one that interests me, but only on dips, and I say this, just to make sure we have decent risk management on the trade here, but it does give us a lot of dips. Like in the past 5 days alone, there's been a massive dip here, massive dip here, massive dip here, and probably another one coming soon. And this is GIGGLE. Like GIGGLE it's not like the official meme coin of CZ's educational like GIGGLE platform, but it is one of the coins that they have been like, soft supporting, like people in the Binance ecosystem. And I think he does want to see this do well because they've been supporting the educational platform. So I think there's a vested interest here for him to see it do well. But you always have to treat this with a bit of caution because it's not the official like GIGGLE's coin. It's at a market cap right now of 130 million, which it's definitely high. Like, your best risk reward on this, and I'm a bit annoyed because my researcher found it at 10 million, and then I didn't buy in because that was the week I was dealing with the ASTER trade, and I just wasn't like that locked into the betas. But anyway, it's run from like 10 to 130. So I think the best risk reward was at that like 20, 30 mil range once it was a bit more established. But I think now what you're looking for is bigger opportunities to get in on dips and then ride the uptrend, because at the end of the day, crypto is about flows, and if this narrative continues to have strong flow and BNB continues to go up, then it's probably going to paint the chart in an upwards pattern like this, where you get higher highs and higher lows, and you can trade accordingly. And you can even trade like, okay, so let's say the structure continues here and you get something like this. You can even trade, so like as long as it doesn't go below a previous low, you stay in the position. So you kind of set your stop above every prior low. So this would be the low that you wouldn't want to take out now. So if it goes up like this, comes down, you can buy in with your inval being at this level here. And if you're playing spot, which I recommend you do with all this risky stuff, it's only like a potential 10% inval, and then you can get in on a reclaim of strength. So I think just playing strength on a lot of these coins is the way to go. But in terms of this list in general, I do like FLOKI and GIGGLE, and that's why I put them up the top here. Now, we're getting into riskier territory as we go down the list, and all the ones I'm highlighting now, I don't feel like I have a big edge on. You've got this 4 token, which obviously ran really aggressively. Obviously, that is a long-standing CZ meme. It's just not one at 200 mil I feel comfortable aping into, but it's one I've obviously been keeping my eye on. And if there was a big dip and potentially set up on it, I might consider a punt, but I don't feel like I have an edge. And I feel, as I mentioned before, like I can stay a little bit safer in the barbell plays, which are like these, and then, potentially these if you want to add them to a barbell. And then this stuff here is like just better for trading and rotating and just having fun with that aggressive section of your portfolio. Some of the Chinese ones have also run up really aggressively, like to multi-hundreds of millions, which I think just doesn't represent the best risk reward. And I can't speak Chinese, so I find it really hard to get into a token where I just don't understand the sentiment of the community. Then going down the list as well, there's Yellow Pepe. This has been performing well. And you can look into this stuff, right? The whole reason for this spreadsheet is you can look into them and you might actually find an opportunity in these coins. These are the ones that I think are the most interesting, but obviously all of these carry risk, so I'm not recommending you APIM, but I'm just presenting them to you if you want to research further. You've got the BSC coin as well. You've got HODL, which is doing well. And then the two that actually interest me a little bit, and I understand these a bit more because they're in English, are the Broccoli coins. So if you remember when CZ announced his dog, there was this big like speculative wave where all the Broccoli coins basically exploded. Some of the coins were listed, then delisted. We're left with a couple leaders. You have one that has a spot listing on Binance and then one that has a perp listing on Binance. I actually think this one, the one with the perp listing, looks better just in terms of the chart and the potential upside on the chart. But the bigger one and the most well-known one is this one, which also has upside compared to its all-time high, but comes at a higher market cap. So if you are going to play it, you could potentially look at getting an entry in both and playing like a bit of a barbell between both. However, I personally prefer this one if I had to pick between the two. And these are two tokens that I did add some exposure to earlier today as a risky play. As I mentioned within this section here, like the aggressive risky play. I didn't touch the others yet, but I've been nibbling into some Broccoli just because I think, look, they've got Binance spot listings. They're CZ's dog. I can just see if the BNB narrative took off, those getting a bit of a revival or at least like a short to mid-term bid. It's not as compelling to me to size up on these as something like a cake though, because obviously it comes with a lot more risk. So I would prefer to play in the slightly safer territory. So these are very much high risk. Now let's get into my plan, and then let's talk about how you can actually play the trenches and spot the runners, because I think there's a lot of alpha and a lot of opportunity in playing the ecosystem. So as I mentioned before, if you are bullish on BNB, that really would predicate your entire strategy here. And if you are bullish, then you would want to be accumulating BNB on dips. And remember, these coins are going to be reflexive to the leader. So you could play a game where every time BNB has a big dip, you could look at laddering into some of the strongest coins in the BSC ecosystem. And I will say this, over the coming days and over the coming weeks, we will see whether this narrative has follow through. If we start to notice it doesn't have follow through, you can cut your losses and if you are trading this stuff and move on pretty quick. If we see that it does have follow through, then I think the more interesting thing is going to be keeping an eye on the tokens which are the most resilient and start to build the best like short-term traction and community, because every single cycle with these rotations like the Solana run, there's that one meme which emerges as like the top most hot meta one, and it was WIF, then it was Fart Coin. Like these are like, very synonymous with the meta. Obviously on Bonk there was Useless. So we're looking for a similar one to emerge out of BSC. So right now it's a bit of a risky spray and pray game because you're trying to pick that or speculate that, before it's actually proven itself. But I think it'll become a bit more apparent over the coming weeks. So that's the good thing, right? When BNB does dip, if you're playing this strategy, you can actually see what holds up and see what still has traction. Unless you're trading these coins, only stick to leaders and have strict invalidation. So if you are going in with the mentality of, all right, I'm going to play this as like a multi-week or a multi-month thing as long as I think BNB is in an uptrend, then you want to stick to the leaders because the rotations can really chop you up on the lower caps. Like, I don't think ASTER's going anywhere. I don't think Cake is going anywhere. FLOKI's been around for a while, but the broccoli, sorry, I don't know why I'm saying broccoli. I think GIGGLE probably has a little bit more staying power, but especially some of these riskier ones, like they could come and go, and then there could be a new one, like 4 could be hot, then some of these Chinese ones could be hot, and that you might just get chopped up by investing in those coins. So unless you're trading them, maybe it's better to stick to the leaders and have strict invalidations. I think there's going to be more runners. So I think there's going to be some new tokens, and I'll teach you in a minute how you can actually spot and trade these tokens, but we don't know what they are yet. So at this stage, it's still extremely PvP if you're playing the rotation game on chain. And remember, a lot of really sophisticated players have actually come in to speculate and gamble on this meta. So yes, people are making a lot of money, but at the same time, there's not a huge like cohort of retail like the Solana narrative last year, meaning your counterparties or the people you're trading against are quite smart and quite sophisticated. So at this stage, it's quite PvP. Although I have seen a lot of people, making money trading this, but I might be a little bit of I might be succumbing to survivorship bias a little bit because a lot of my friends are obviously very successful in this space because that's who I want to, be around to motivate myself. So a lot of them, they're probably doing really well because they're actually just very smart and sophisticated players. Maybe if you ask the average person how they're going on BSC, the numbers would be a little bit more skewed. So I just want you to be aware of the fact that these rotations are PvP, which I guess is why I commented on strategy 1 and 2, which protects you a little bit alongside the barbell. And then the final thing to do, the most EV positive thing to do is just to be aware. So develop, and I'm going to show you how to do it here, a system for you to actually spot these coins, but also put yourself in the right circles. Like in the Discord, I'm going to be sharing what I'm doing in the Risky Plays channel. Obviously, Fabian's been posting about these. He shared Cake. He shared a new one, which we're going to discuss in a minute yesterday. So if you're in the right circles, you're going to be able to get access to the alpha before anyone else. And I suppose that's why people are really hustling right now to, get into these Eastern circles, because that's clearly where, there's a strong narrative at the moment. So let's talk about Fabian's and then let's get into the strategy a little bit. So Fabian had identified a token called Form, which is like the, I guess, pump fund of the BSC ecosystem. So if you scroll down, you can see 4.meme is one of the top chains or top protocols right now for DEX volume, doing 577 million in the last 7 days and 800 million over the last 30 days. And in the last 24 hours alone, it's contributed 139 million to that figure, which is pretty insane. As Fabian points out, it's a little sketchy because the chart looks a bit manipulated and the lack of team communication and token clarity also doesn't fill in with much confidence. But on the other hand, there's a strong optionality that the team capitalizes on the opportunity to announce token buybacks and pump the price, which we've started seeing rumors of, which could have a large effect on the token. So this is one to keep your eye on. It was doing really well, and then it had a bit of a drawdown. So this could potentially be an opportunity. Fabian took a small position, but as he mentions, it is a highly speculative play to keep your eye on. So what you can actually do is I use Sigma for this because I think it's the best trading bot for the BSC ecosystem. If you click onto Binance, or if you just use the search button, you can find a lot of these tokens and search them up. So the one that's really popular right now is as we discussed, like the Form token. And this was on a big run and then it had a big drawdown, as you can see. So if you want to search up a token and trade it, you can trade it directly here. The other thing that I think you can do to find outliers in this market is click on Binance and you can actually sort by 24-hour growth to see what's gaining a lot of traction, 1 hour growth, and a lot of these are Chinese, so it does benefit you to have, you can Google Translate, but to have some idea of what's going on there. BSC, the token we discussed before, has had a really strong 24 hours. But what's very interesting is actually tracking the holder growth, because you want to look at the tokens which are gaining network effect. So if you sort by holders, you can actually look at how many holders a token has relative to its market cap. And what you're looking for are tokens with a lot of holders, but low market caps, which means high retail distribution and high retail interest and involvement. Obviously, they can spoof holder numbers, but that's why it's your job to look for and identify the outliers and then go and research the token even further. But once again, the reason I haven't traded a lot of these aggressively is because a lot of them are Chinese or are branded as Chinese. So I find it hard to dig into the communities. What you can actually do to help you dig a little bit into the communities is go into cookie.fun. If you scroll down and sort by sentiment change, and you can search the token directly, a lot of these tokens are going to show up because obviously they're gaining a lot of sentiment. So for example, GIGGLE, which is tracking really well in terms of sentiment growth, you can click on it And then it's very good because the AI curates a feed on the right and it actually can sort by Chinese. So if you want to see what the top Chinese creators are saying and seeing if top Chinese creators are in, and you can Google Translate, you can actually see all their posts on the right. You can also sort by Korean, Japanese, English. So for me, Cookie's been the most helpful tool to try and go down this crazy rabbit hole of Chinese tokens. Even though it's obviously very difficult to understand, it's helped me understand because, for example, you know, I looked up FOR here, which is one of the big tokens on BSC right now. Then I go Chinese, and then I can scroll, and obviously when you click into X, you can translate to see what the Chinese creators are actually saying. So that's helped me identify, and you can also identify the top creators that are speaking about these coins. But it is difficult without the nuance of like, oh, this creator is reputable, this creator isn't reputable. So I think that's where you can use Grok to kind of try and work it out, which is what I've been doing. But that's where it becomes a little bit more difficult. But I think for this stuff, the best thing to do, because a lot of them aren't on centralized exchanges, is making sure you have like a terminal. So the reason I use Sigma is because we'll just use this as a random example, and you can do it on your phone as well. So you can literally trade on the go. You can basically set limit orders, you can buy, you can sell, and you can do all of this stuff from the interface here instead of having to route through like PancakeSwap, or, you know, a lot of these aren't listed on centralized exchanges. So for me, this has been the best way. I've actually partnered with Sigma to give you something very, very cool. I genuinely use the product, so it's a very nice partnership. What you can do is if you sign up using the link in the description below, for the first 200 people that sign up, we're going to be, so you need to be quick, we're going to be giving away $50 airdropped to your Sigma accounts. So all you need to do is click the link below, go onto Sigma, open an account through that link, and you will get, if you're one of the first 200 users, a $50 bonus. I'll leave all of the necessary terms and conditions next to the link once you click on it, so you guys can have all the details about that. If you don't make the first 200 people, we will be doing something special for anyone that's on my link. So we might do something like I was doing with Blow from before, where we actually just give away money to people's wallets that are randomly signed up under my Sigma link. So you want to make sure you have an account anyway, just so you can, if you can't get the $50, at least you're getting exposed. So if you're watching this video later, past the first 200 people, at least you'll get some special campaigns and the ability to receive one of those airdrops that I'll be doing on the channel. So I'll leave a link below, because if you're going to trade this stuff, you're going to need a good terminal for it. There are others as well, but personally, I think Sigma is the leader and the data backs it up. It's definitely one of the strongest players in the BSC ecosystem. They're also on Solana and stuff as well. So that's a couple ways to spot runners. Something else that you can actually do is go into DeFi Llama, and you can see FOR's been doing very well, but go to BSC and actually look at the chains and the protocols that are doing the most volume. Because I think with these narratives, the things that really succeed and the things that I think have the strongest risk reward beyond the meme tokens, because the meme tokens don't have great risk reward, they're very rotational, are the pick and shovel plays. I mean, BNB is the ultimate pick and shovel. The next pick and shovel for the BSC ecosystem is PancakeSwap, because it has a lot of the liquidity. Then the next one, you can start going down the list again and again. It's probably the one Fabian pointed out, although as he mentioned, it's a bit riskier because it's not that transparent, which is Form, but it is ranking very highly in terms of volume. And if another app starts to significantly gain traction just by keeping an eye on DeFi Llama every single day, and you can actually download the CSV and get more information that you can analyze, I think this is a good practice to do just to stay in the know. The other thing it's going to help you do, not only to spot individual opportunities, is spot opportunities on the overall trend as well. Because let's say you notice there's 7 or 8 consecutive days, and you can even look at the weekly. So you could be 4 consecutive weeks where it's down, 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 down. That could be an indicator the narrative is drying up. But if you keep seeing higher highs in terms of the amount of volume on BSC, that's an indicator that it's continuing to gain traction. So there are 2 things you can use to track this. One, you can use, as I showed you earlier in the video, the D-Bank fund flow chart to see where the funds are flowing from Solana ETH to BSC or vice versa. But then looking at this volume, you can actually see, so if you go into DeFi Llama and you go into protocol DEX volume and click on BSC, or if you just search up BSC, it'll come up, then you can actually track this trend, which I think is very, very helpful. So I think with all of this stuff, just to summarize, A lot of this stuff's very rotational. A lot of this stuff you won't have an edge unless you actively build an edge. Obviously in my Discord, I'm going to post when I can and when I see an opportunity. If it's on a low cap, I'll make the necessary disclaimers about that. I have a risky plays channel, which is like my lower conviction but higher risk, a bit more degen channel. Obviously Fabian's also been degenning a little bit into this stuff as well. So I'll keep you updated there. But I think overall, the barbell approach is probably going to be your safest bet after you work out what your affinity is towards the BNB token, because I think that will dictate your strategy a little bit here. And there's nothing wrong, if you don't want to allocate a bunch of capital, to just trade this narrative, just wait for the right setups to present, maybe look at some liquidations or some dips after a potential local top has been put in, just to try and establish whether this trend has longevity, because I think a lot of people are burnt from the last time the BSC rotation happened super quick. But overall, balance of probabilities, I do think it's plus EV to be paying attention and looking for opportunities in this ecosystem. And ultimately, that's why I made today's video, to help you do that. But it's also why I'm spending some time researching this stuff. And also my research is spending a lot of time on this stuff at the moment as well. So I'll leave a link in the description if you want to sign up to Sigma to get access to that $50 airdrop if you're one of the first users to sign up. And I'm going to see you in the next video. Have a lovely rest of your day. Peace out.